Welcome in, everybody, to my first ever edition of my roster review series. This is a project I've been working on for well over a year, studying players, putting together all of these rankings, and I'm just really excited to get into this. There's a lot of player movement going on these days with the CFL's retirements coming these last few weeks. At least there haven't been too many significant pieces that have retired to make it too difficult on me to keep track of for this review process. But if things change, there probably will be a couple players on this video, since this is the first one, that will retire. But until they do, this is what the outlook is for the Toronto Argonauts going into the 2021 season. And this is the perfect team to start off because they had the craziest offseason. They brought in a bunch of, high-profile players that haven't played in the CFL before, and we're really excited as CFL fans, to see how this experiment plays out in Toronto after they had really an abysmal 2019 season. So we're going to see how it plays out, and without further ado, let's get into it. So I'll talk about what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So first, I'm going to go over the positional group rankings, so looking at every position group on this team and see where it ranks in terms of my perception of where they rank in the CFL. And then we're going to go over the projected starters, just where I see the camp battles taking place here in 2021, as well as some ratio possibilities where they're going to start their 7 Canadians. And then we'll get into my team award predictions for the Toronto Argos. And then finally, I'll wrap it up with some conclusions and general expectations of this team going into 2021. And this is going to be a long video, so there are going to be timestamps that I'll put in the description for those that just want to skip forward to a particular part in this video. And without further ado, let's get into the first reveal of the first positional group. That's going to be the quarterback position. And they're actually going to rank 9th here. And the main reason why they rank 9th is mostly just because of trust. I don't trust this group of quarterbacks as much as I do the other 8 teams in the CFL, and that's why they rank dead last here. Nick Arbuckle has only started 7 games in the CFL, and he looked really good in those appearances with the Calgary Stampeders. Now, he's going to be forced into his first starting role here in 2021, and he's also going to be looking over his shoulder because McLeod Bethel-Thompson, who actually led the league in touchdown passes in 2019, they brought him back, and it's going to be interesting to see if Nick Arbuckle is given such a short leash this season, even in a short season like we're going to have, 14 games. Is McLeod Bethel-Thompson going to eventually push Nick Arbuckle out of the starting role here at some point in this season if Arbuckle struggles? And I really like Arbuckle as a player. I think has really good decision making. I think he processes really well. It's just going to be about getting that CFL experience and getting off to a really good start, and that's going to be really important. If this team struggles out of the gate, there's going to be a lot of people calling for McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And then finally, they also brought in Antonio Pipkin, who actually started 2019 as the starter for the Montreal Alouettes before Vernon Adams came in and basically just took that team over. And so as a result, Pipkin is probably looking at the 3rd quarterback job here just because he has CFL experience. For running backs, they're going to rank 5th. This is just a really solid group. I think really highly of John White. He's been in the CFL for a long time. Not the most flashy guy. He's not going to, break a whole bunch of runs, but he's really good in that short area quickness. He'll get those 5-yard gains that will keep moving the chains. He can catch the ball to the backfield. Just a really solid all-around back. So I really liked Toronto bringing him in from BC. They got Bishop Sankey, who was 2nd-round pick of the Tennessee Titans. It's going to be interesting to see if he has anything left in the tank now coming up to the CFL as a rookie, nearly at 30 years old. So going to be interesting to see right there. And then AJ Ouellette, who actually started a couple games at the back end of that 2019 season, looked pretty good in those appearances, and he's going to be kind of throwing his hat in the ring in this backup running back kind of role here. And it's going to be interesting to see if John White, who's up there a little bit in age, if he gets supplanted by one of these guys. And Kenneth Dixon, he's a guy that comes in, NFL cast off. Matt Colburn, same thing. We're going to see if those guys can push John White for reps here in the Toronto backfield. But overall, very solid group. I think it has a lot of potential, and I just have a lot of faith in John White going into the 2021 season, just as a really good safety net back for this team going into 2021. At the wide receiver slot back position, this is where they made a lot of their additions, and they're going to rank 4th here, and they honestly could have ranked higher. It was really tough for me to decide those top 4 or 5 receiving groups in the CFL this year, just so many good ones, but they're going to rank 4th, and a big reason why they rank so high is Eric Rogers, who they bring over in a trade from the Calgary Stampeders. Eric Rogers was a really good receiver in 2019 with the Stampeders. He had another couple solid seasons with the Stamps. Has really shown a lot at the CFL level. Just as an overall receiver, he hits all areas of the field. He'll make those contested catches. He'll create those big plays. He does have those occasional drops and lapses in concentration, but really good receiver overall, and he's just a bona fide number 1 guy at the CFL level, in my opinion. Tavares Daniels is a guy that has shown a lot of potential over his time in the CFL, has made a lot of big plays, but he has never really put it all together as that number 1 guy or one of these core guys of a team's offense. He's always kind of been that 3rd, 4th option that really has shown ability in those limited opportunities, and he's going to probably get a little more opportunities as the projected number 2 in this Toronto offense. And then you got Ricky Collins, who the team just signed prior to me making this video. Really interesting player because he broke onto the scene with a 1,000-yard season in 2019 with Edmonton after being in the league for a few years, and really had his breakout that year. And it's going to be interesting to see where he fits in this receiving core, which has a bunch of options, as you see on screen here. Martavis Bryant, who was a former Pittsburgh Steelers star guy that looked like he was going to be one of the next great Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers, but then, the suspensions from drug use, or that's why he found himself out of the NFL. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him. I think he's probably going to be starting out wide if he is in the starting lineup, but we'll see more on that when we get to the projected starters part of this video. And then you got Juwan Brescacin, one of the key Canadian additions they brought in last offseason. And Brescacin, the main thing with him is just staying healthy. He has not really been able to stay healthy in his career. Showed a lot of potential. He's made some unreal highlight reel catches. Brescacin, he's probably going to be a Canadian starter for this team, but we'll see because of his health issues. I just don't know how much this team is going to rely on him. Kendall Wright is a former first-round pick of the Tennessee Titans back in 2012. I think he actually had a 1,000-yard season, if I'm remembering correctly, in the NFL. But he fell out of the NFL relatively quickly by 2017. He's trying to get back and resurrect his professional football career here in Toronto. I just don't know where he fits in. Another guy that's going to be competing for playing time in training camp. Chandler Worthy played pretty well at the end of that 2019 season. He might get a bump above these guys, other guys, for playing time here in 2021, just to start the season at least, because he has that CFL experience. And Terrell Singfield, he comes back to the CFL. He had some really good moments with the Hamilton Tiger Cats as a return man and as a receiver. It's going to be interesting to see, is he just going to be playing primarily a return role with this group, or is he going to fit in somewhere in this offense? Levi Noel is a Canadian receiver I really do like from the University of Toronto. Started to show a lot of flashes the last couple of seasons in the CFL. Really good special teams player, but we'll see again where he fits into this offense. He could be a starter if Brescacin continues to struggle with his health issues. And then Dejon Brissett was their number 1 overall pick in the 2020 CFL draft. Actually went number 2 overall in the first round. And again, I don't see him playing much just because of the depth of this group. I think he will have to be incorporated on special teams. He might see some return reps. I don't know where the Argos are going to stand on that, but really deep receiving unit, as you can see. Very excited to see how this position in particular plays out for the Argos in 2021. Now let's go to the offensive line, where they're going to rank 4th, and this may surprise some people because I've been getting on the Argos about their offensive line basically the entire offseason. I actually like this Argos offensive line as a whole, as you can see why they're ranked 4th. But the problem is just that right tackle position, as we'll talk about more later on. I really like Isaiah Cage. He only started a handful of games in his first CFL season in 2019, but he looked really good at that left tackle spot, so really excited to see how his development continues going forward. Darius Bladdock, a guy that they bring over from the Rough Riders, really good Canadian guard starter who will solidify them on the inside. He probably projects as their starter at one of the guard positions. Cody Speller, who they traded for from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, really good, solid player that wasn't really getting necessarily the playing time that he needed in Winnipeg because they have such a really solidified unit as it is. So he's going to get an expanded role here in Toronto, probably as this team's starting center. Philip Blake, who was kind of a late bloomer because he was a 4th round pick, I believe, in the NFL, and he stuck around there for a few years before coming to the CFL at a later age. It took him a while, but he's really turned himself into a very solid CFL offensive lineman at that guard position. He's really quick. He's really good in the run game in particular. And then Jamal Campbell is a guy that I've criticized a lot. I think he's just better suited as a guard, personally. I think he's just kind of been exposed at that right tackle position the Argos have been playing him at the last couple of years. But that being said, that's probably where he's going to be starting. When we look at the starting lineups, we'll take a look at that. And Shane Richards, he was the number 1 overall pick in the 2019 CFL draft. Didn't see a lot of time in his rookie season due to injury. He only really played that one game. I think he started the first game of the season, but it's going to be interesting to see if he breaks into the lineup at any point this season, given the fact that he was drafted so high. Darren Churchill, similar thing. He was drafted in the first round of the 2020 CFL draft, a guy that, provides solid Canadian depth to this group. And then same thing with Maurice Simba, another guy that's just going to provide some Canadian depth to this offensive line. Very Canadian heavy offensive line room, as you can see in this graphic. Now on the defensive side, the defensive line is another area where they made a lot of key additions this offseason, and that's why they're going to rank 3rd in this ranking. To begin this discussion, you got to start with Charleston Hughes. He's arguably the best CFL pass rusher I've ever seen. He's just so consistent. There's guys like Cameron Wake who are just so dominant in short stays in the CFL. But Charleston Hughes just so consistent year after year, doing it at such an old age now. He's 37, and now with that layoff between the seasons, this is the big question I think is going to be very interesting to see how it plays out here in the 2021 season. Are these guys that are a bit older, because the CFL, some of these star players like Andrew Harris, Charleston Hughes, they're a bit older. How are they going to react? Is the time off going to hurt them away from the game? Or is that layoff going to hurt them? Or is it going to help them recovery-wise, and they're going to be more fresh going into this season? So Charleston Hughes, I expect nothing but the best from him because he's just shown you nothing to the contrary over his CFL career. Cordero Law projects as their other starting defensive end, one of the best pure speed rushers in the CFL. The last time we saw them play in 2019, played really well with the Calgary Stampeders. I was surprised that they kind of just threw him into that trade to the Argos along with Eric Rogers. So really good defensive end combo there for the Argos. Drake Nevis, I loved that addition. Probably is going to finally make his debut with the Toronto Argonauts. And he's just this big plugger guy up inside. Really huge reason why the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were so successful at stopping the run in 2019. And that was really a big reason why they were able to put these teams in these long passing situations. He's going to make a big difference to this run defense, which was kind of a problem in 2019 for the Argos. And then Justin Thomas, he's a guy that is probably going to be the first one that gets a crack at that other defensive tackle position because he has a little bit of CFL experience, played some games, but not too confident he's going to be the long-term starter this season. And then you get into all these other guys, a lot of interesting names here. Robbie Smith is a Canadian pass rusher from Laurier that I really liked. Last year saw a lot of good playing time, had a lot of good reps in those opportunities he did get. Really good speed off the edge. And then Odell Willis, he's longtime CFL vet. He's probably just going to be a rotational pass rusher, but I see him making the team in this case. Eli Harold, a former first round pick in the NFL, another guy that, is going to try to resurrect his career here. Coney Ely, he played in the XFL with the Houston Roughnecks. He actually had a nice interception years ago with Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl while playing with the Carolina Panthers. Really interesting guy there. Sean Oakman, everybody's kind of seen the meme with the, crop top jersey. And unfortunately, the unfortunate circumstances really brought his football career to a halt for years. And now he's trying to resurrect his career. I think if things worked out for him, he could challenge for that other defensive tackle spot with Justin Thomas. And then Shane Ray is another guy that was a first-round pick in the NFL by the Denver Broncos. Again, more of an edge guy. So most of these guys are edge guys. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets cut out of this group, honestly, because they're probably not going to be able to keep them all. Ronald Ollie, last chance U-Star, interesting player. Going to be interesting to see again. I'm not putting too much analysis into these guys because you just never know if they're ever going to work out. It's just, they're lottery tickets, right? These guys that have never played in the CFL, you just don't know how they're going to adapt to the Canadian game, so naturally I spend less time on them. Ricky Neal, similar kind of things, right? Fabian Foote is a guy, a Canadian defensive lineman, who's seen some playing time over his career, but I don't think he's going to factor in too much because I don't think they're going to play Canadians all that much on the defensive line in 2021 in Toronto. Now, at linebacker, this is where things get really special for Toronto. They're going to rank first. And the reason for this is just, you get a really good combination of Canadians and just they have a couple really good strong side linebacker options. And this is a really important position in the CFL. Strong side linebacker is, you got to have a linebacker who's really a defensive back, but can get up and play that physical style near the line of scrimmage, but can also go and take that inside receiver in man coverage. These are pretty recent additions of Chris Edwards and Dexter McCoyle. Both guys that have played strong side linebacker in the CFL. Dexter McCoyle had an outstanding season with Edmonton back in the day. I think he had like 6 interceptions. Really got a lot of opportunities in the NFL, at least contract-wise. Didn't really see the field too much in the NFL over the last few years, but now he comes back to the CFL just literally this week. Him along with Ricky Collins Jr., those are the 2 big signings that happened right before I recorded this video, so they're going to pencil them in here. And then Hainok Muamba and Cameron Judge are 2 of the best Canadian linebackers in the CFL. Probably the 2 biggest free agents this offseason, and they both signed with Toronto. Believe it or not, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys work together, but those guys are for sure going to be 2 of their 7 Canadian starters. They're going to start Muamba, Judge, and then one of these 2 guys, Edwards or McCoyle. I would think it was going to be McCoyle, but I think I could see one of these other guys, the guy that isn't starting somewhere else in the secondary for this group. But really, really elite linebacking group here for Toronto. It could be a really difference-making unit for this club. And then Bear Woods, CFL vet, going to provide nice depth. Nick Shorthill, a Canadian linebacker, is going to provide some special teams and really good Canadian depth if they go down here in 2021. And then Nelkus Quimo, same thing. So you got some good depth to shore up those Canadian spots here in the linebacking core. And then Jordan Moore is another guy that's, one of those free agent additions that have never played in the CFL before. So we'll see what he can provide to this lineup. In the secondary, they're going to rank 6th. And this is an interesting group. I've criticized this group as well throughout my videos, but I actually really do like it. I think I'm warming up to it. I think they look much more complete now that strong side linebacker group is solidified with the McCoyle and Edwards signings. Alden Darby led this team in interceptions in 2019. Really interesting player. More of a risk-taking kind of defensive back. He'll give up those big plays. So I was kind of iffy on his film in 2019. But, on that Toronto team, I wouldn't pin everything on him. I'm really interested to see if he can improve on his film. And then Cresden Butler, a CFL vet they bring in, has experience playing halfback. Probably pencils in there for the Argos at that spot. Robertson Daniel, a guy that doesn't have a ton of experience, but played in Calgary over the last few years, and he got some starting experience there, and he likely projects as one of their starters as well. Arjun Colquhoun, a Canadian defensive back, the rare Canadian corner in the CFL, and it's going to be interesting to see if they even start him. The ratio possibilities are pretty fluid here for the Argos, so I don't know if he necessarily starts on a week-to-week basis, but it's really good to have a Canadian that can start in the secondary for sure. Shaquille Richardson, I think he's going to be another one of their starters in the secondary. So those first 5 guys I do see starting in the secondary, but I'm just not too sure about Colquhoun there. And then you got a bunch of guys like Chris Humes, a guy that has some CFL experience in the past. Matt Boateng and Robert Woodson are two Canadian defensive backs that have hung around over the last few years, and we'll see if they see any major breakthroughs in their development. But again, gonna be really difficult for them to see the field because of their ratio depth at other positions may not let them see the field at all here in 2021, at least on the defensive side of the ball. It might be a special team situation for both those guys, but really good defensive back room despite them finishing 6th. I'm really excited to see how they string this unit together. A lot of defensive back units in fluctuation here in the CFL as we approach the season. So, going to be interested to see where this group, all of these players line up in this Argos 2021 defense. Now on special teams, they're going to rank 5th. That ranking is really inflated just because of how I feel about Boris Bede, their kicker/punter. He's one of the few guys that can do both jobs in the CFL. He kicks and he does the punting duties. That could be super valuable for a team, especially with this year the CFL is reducing the roster size by a couple players. So you don't want to waste that carrying a separate punter and kicker. At least in my opinion, that's what I would like to have. I'd like to have a guy that can handle both duties, like Boris Bede or a Justin Medlock. So I really like him. Toshiki Sato, a guy that they brought in from the global draft process, likely doesn't make the team here, but we'll see. Jake Reinhardt, he projects as their special teams long snapper. What am I saying? Long snapper in this situation. Terrell Singfield has some return experience with the Tiger Cats when he previously played in the CFL. And Chandler Worthy, another guy that's seen some return experience. I'm not too sure what they're going to do with the return situation. It might just be a rookie that they put back there or one of these receivers. But I just looked for guys that have handled the ball on punt returns and kick returns in the CFL before. And so those two guys fit the bill for the Argos in this scenario. Now let's get into the projected starters for both the offense and the defense. So I apologize for the graphic. I tried to make it as symmetrical as possible. I think I figured it out, but Excel just kind of trips me out sometimes. But basically the players that have an asterisk on it, those are the Canadian starters for this unit. And then the players that are bolded, those are the players that I'm not particularly confident are going to be starting for that team in 2021. So as we go along in this roster review process, these are going to be the norms for these kind of videos. Tavares Daniels, Martavis Bryant, those are the two outside receivers I have projected here. That position, that last receiver spot, can kind of go to anybody. I think it's going to be a massive camp battle between him, a guy like Kendall Wright, a lot of these guys that are trying to, make a name for themselves in the CFL. But I think Martavis Bryant, since he was the biggest name addition and he was, he just shows so much athletic potential, I think he's probably the most salvageable. So I project him to be the starter. Eric Rogers, not enough said with him. He's going to be one of their starters for sure. Ricky Collins, I think because of his CFL experience last year, he's going to be a starter for this team. And then obviously you got Nick Arbuckle and John White, who I don't think Nick Arbuckle is going to be under threat to start the season. I think they're for sure going to ride him for the first month of the season. But if he starts to struggle after that first month, then you start seeing potential for McLeod Bethel Thompson to come in and take the starting role. John White, a running back that, he's going to be challenged by all those guys like Bishop Sankey in the backfield, but we'll see how that running back room shapes out for Toronto. And then I think they're going to start 4 Canadians on the offensive line. Philip Blake and Darius Bladdock are going to be very good additions. I really like that interior group. Isaiah Cage, as I said before, I think he has incredible potential, even though he's only really shown it over a small sample size so far in the CFL. And then at right tackle, Jamal Campbell is the big question mark. I don't know what they're going to do here. I could see them starting somebody else. Say Shane Richards, the number 1 pick from 2019, takes a big jump. I could see him starting in that role if he shows great development from what we saw of him previously. So, going to be interesting to see what the Argos do at that spot in particular. Now on defense, here's how it shakes out for this team. So, you got Law and Hughes as your main defensive ends. Drake Nevis for sure going to be starting on the inside. And then Justin Thomas, like I said, that position's kind of up in the air. I think that position is going to be fought for over training camp. I think the Argos see that as a position where one of these guys that they signed in the offseason can come in there and win that job. So I'm interested to see what they do with that group. And then the 2 Canadian linebackers in the middle with Judge and Mwamba. I put Dexter McCoyle as the starter here for the Argos at strong side linebacker. I'm not 100% confident in that just because they have Chris Edwards there that played that role in BC. But I think McCoyle is the more experienced player, so he'll get the nod there. I do see Chris Edwards factoring in somewhere in the secondary, though, on a consistent basis. And then a lot of these guys in the secondary, Alden Darby, I say he's probably going to be that center fielder guy for this group. Shaq Richardson and Cresden Butler taking the halfback roles for this defense. And then Arjun Calhoun and Robertson Daniel, guys that are probably going to play the outside if they're the starters in this defense. Now, moving on to my team award predictions, and this is where it's going to be interesting to see who takes control of this team, who's going to be the guys that this team relies on, because it's quite possible that, for example, my number 1 most outstanding player is Eric Rogers for this group. It's possible that he is the guy that kind of gets pushed aside if one of these other receivers breaks out in this Toronto Argonauts receiving core. So for now, I'm picking Eric Rogers to win the most outstanding player nominee for the Argos. I just don't trust the quarterback situation enough to pick one of those guys. I wanted to take Charleston Hughes to be the most outstanding player as well, but I just think Rogers is in for a big season. I really do. I think he's just the most proven guy in this unit. So, and most outstanding defensive player, I'm going with Charleston Hughes just because you'd be an idiot to bet against that at this point. He's just so good. You have other options like Hanock Mwamba, Cameron Judge, but it's really hard to go against him just because, he's good enough for 15 sacks every year in the CFL, which is pretty crazy. My most outstanding Canadian player is really going to become down between Cameron Judge and Hanock Mwamba in the linebacking core. I went with Judge just because I think he's a slightly better player. I think he has better coverage skills. He'll get his hands on a few more balls and deflect a lot more passes. So, and Mwamba's more of that run stopping thumper kind of type. He's gonna put up a ton of tackles, but I think Judge may come away with a few more interceptions or force a few more fumbles or whatever. So I think Judge is the pick here for most outstanding Canadian. And then the most outstanding offensive lineman, really interesting debate here, but I'm going with Philip Blake. I think he's going to have his best season now at age 35 in the CFL. Really, really strong run blocker, as I said before, and really good, especially in those pulling guard situations, and was really good at that with the Riders in 2019. So I am going on a limb here a bit because a lot of these guys, it could kind of go a lot of different ways in that offensive line room, but I'm picking Philip Blake to be the most outstanding offensive lineman for the Argos in 2021. And then my most outstanding rookie prediction is Bishop Sankey. Really interesting guy. I project him to be in competition as that backup running back role. And this award is very difficult to predict because these guys come out of nowhere. So I'm just going to throwing it out there. It's going to be Bishop Sankey because I could see him getting some opportunities in this Toronto Argonauts backfield. And then finally, I'm just going to finish up with big question about the Argos and then my general prediction about this team going into this season. So the biggest question is obviously, can the Argos get some consistent week-to-week quarterback play? They rank number 9th for a reason, and I just don't know if you can count on Arbuckle or McLeod Bethel-Thompson consistently over a full CFL season. We just haven't seen it to this point in time. That's going to be the really big question. If those guys can answer the bell, one of those guys can answer the bell, this team is going to be lethal potentially in 2021. And so that leads me to the general prediction is that I think that this team is going to be a playoff team in 2021. I think they're going to probably finish second in the CFL's East Division, but I think they're very much in the Grey Cup conversation as long as they can get some kind of competent quarterback play for this team. And with that said, that is going to be the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you so much for checking out the first ever roster review on the channel. There's going to be a new random team coming up next week or whenever I can get this video out. And I'm just really excited to continue the rest of this series. Make sure you leave a like on this video. It really helps me get it out to more people on YouTube. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.